It starts with the silence. Not the kind of silence you get in your house when the power goes out, or in the middle of the night when the city hushes for a few hours. No, this is the kind that lives out here, thick and deep, as if the world has pulled a heavy blanket over its mouth. That's the first thing I noticed when I turned off the main road. A narrow logging path split off the highway, one I'd driven down dozens of times before, but now overgrown and almost swallowed up by the forest. Pine needles blanketed the gravel, muffling the tyres. The steering wheel vibrated softly under my hands as the old truck rolled over the uneven ground. My eyes drifted out to the trees, towering black spruce, tamarack and birch, stretching tall and unmoving. The kind of woods where you can lose time, maybe even lose yourself, if you're not careful. A pale haze hung low to the forest floor, not quite fog, not quite smoke, just still. It had been almost a year since I'd been back, 11 months give or take. I'd meant to come in the spring, but the rivers flooded. Then work got busy, and by the time fall rolled around, I was more tired than I wanted to admit. I needed to reset, clear my head, and the cabin, my old hunting cabin, had always been the place to do that. When I finally saw it, tucked between two thick evergreens, it felt like finding something sacred. The structure was humble, a weathered A-frame I built with my father in my 20s, nestled against the south ridge. The pine planks had turned grey with age, and the metal chimney leaned a little more each year, but it stood firm. Just seeing it again made my shoulders drop. It felt like the forest had exhaled just for me. I pulled the truck close to the front steps, killed the engine, and just sat for a moment. No cell signal, of course, no noise, just the gentle tick of the cooling engine, and beyond that, nothing. That good kind of nothing. Then I stepped out. The air was sharp, mid-October sharp, crisp enough to bite your cheeks and make your nose run. Smelled like old leaves, moss, and something distant. Wood smoke, maybe, though I hadn't passed another soul in miles. I grabbed my canvas duffel from the passenger seat and slung it over one shoulder. My boots crunched on frost-covered needles as I crossed to the porch. The steps creaked just like I remembered. Third one down still felt spongy underfoot. I reached into my coat pocket for the cabin keys, feeling the familiar shape of the old brass ring, and pulled it free. There were only 3 keys on it. One for the cabin door, one for the shed out back, and one I honestly couldn't remember the use for anymore. I found the right one, the cabin key with a smudge of old red paint near the teeth, and slid it into the lock. It turned easier than I expected. That stopped me. Usually I had to wiggle it, coax it a little, but this time it gave way like butter. I pushed the door open slowly. It swung wide without resistance. The cabin was dark, colder inside than it was out. I stood in the doorway, not crossing the threshold just yet, taking in the stillness. The smell wasn't right. I expected dust, maybe mouse droppings, stale firewood, but there was no scent at all. I stepped inside. The wooden floor creaked beneath me. Light filtered through the old curtains in soft, colourless beams. Everything looked about the same. My cot in the far corner, the wood stove near the centre, the little table with 2 folding chairs near the window. My lantern still hung on its hook beside the shelf of gear. But something felt off. It took me a minute to figure it out. The details were all there, but they weren't quite how I left them. The chairs were pulled out slightly, as if someone had just been sitting in them. A knife was missing from the magnetic strip on the wall, and one of the old wool blankets had been draped over the table, like someone tried to make a tent and changed their mind halfway through. I felt that chill, not from the air, but from somewhere deeper. Instinct. A shift in the gut. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a pile of gear, maybe a sleeping bag, or an old tarp bunched up in the far corner near the stove. But as I stepped closer, my breath caught. It was a body, a human body, curled into itself like someone trying to sleep off a long cold night. Dressed in a faded flannel shirt, dirt-streaked jeans and scuffed hiking boots. Arms tucked close, face turned away from me, skin pale, very pale. I stopped breathing, just stood there, locked in place. I don't know how long I stared. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. My mind was scrambling to make sense of it. Maybe it was a mannequin. Maybe a hunter got lost. Maybe... No, that was a person. Cold, still, and not moving. My heart pounded in my ears, my throat closed up. I backed away slowly, like I was trying not to spook a bear. I didn't want to turn my back, but I couldn't look anymore. I stepped outside and let the screen door slap shut behind me. My legs felt weak. I sat down hard on the front steps and leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to catch my breath. The forest was silent. No wind, no birds, no rustling. Just a pressure in the air, like the woods were waiting to see what I'd do next. I rubbed my hands together for warmth, though my palms were sweating. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Just this sick knot in my stomach and the heavy weight of what I'd seen. I tried to think rationally. Maybe someone broke in, squatted here, froze to death. It happens, right? But the door was locked. The windows weren't broken. The stove had ashes in it, recent ones maybe, and there was no smell of rot. None. I pulled out my phone. No bars. Of course. I glanced at the tree line. Nothing moved. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. And not just because of the body inside, but something else. Something watching. Something that had been here before I arrived. Maybe still here. The sun was beginning to drop behind the ridge, casting long blue shadows across the clearing. I could see my breath in front of me now, steady little puffs in the cold air. I sat there for a long time, not moving, not going back inside, just staring out at the forest, trying to understand what the hell I'd just walked into. I don't know how long I sat on that porch. The cold crept in slowly, through my coat, into my boots, into the joints of my fingers. The kind of cold that makes your breath feel heavier. I could hear the creak of a branch somewhere above me, nothing else. Eventually, I stood. It felt like a decision I wasn't ready to make, but I couldn't sit out there forever, and I couldn't just leave. Not without knowing, not without understanding what the hell was lying in the corner of my cabin. So I went back inside. The door groaned quietly behind me. The dimness had thickened, sunset was almost gone, leaving the interior bathed in that grey-blue shadow light that makes everything look haunted. I stayed near the door, didn't step fully in. My eyes adjusted slowly. The body was still there, curled up in that same unnatural too-still way. I could see more now. Dirty blonde hair matted to the back of the head, a torn jacket, one boot untied. I forced myself to step closer. Each board beneath my boots seemed to echo a little too loud. My breath sounded too loud. Even the wind outside had gone still again. I crouched a few feet away, careful not to get too close. I didn't touch them, couldn't. But I looked. Really looked. The skin was pale but not rotted. Just cold. Bluish around the fingertips. Lips slightly parted. There was no blood. No bruising, no signs of trauma I could see. Whoever they were, they hadn't died violently, at least not in any obvious way. But they had died here, alone, in my cabin. I slowly stood again, heart pounding. There was something in the body's hand, a piece of paper folded tightly, like a note. But I didn't take it. Not yet. My fingers twitched toward it, then pulled back. Some part of me felt like I wasn't ready to know what it said. So instead, I did what my instincts told me. I searched the cabin. The first thing I noticed was the stove. There were ashes in the firebox, but not old ones. I reached inside with a piece of kindling and stirred the powder. Still dry, still loose. Someone had burned something here not long ago. I opened the small pantry next. The canned food I'd left last fall had been disturbed. Some opened and emptied, some still stacked, just not the way I'd left them. The labels were curled with moisture. One tin of beans had been peeled halfway open and left on the counter. Flies buzzed around it, sluggish in the cold. My skin prickled. Next I checked my gear shelf. My rifle was still there, same position, but the case looked touched. Dust had been brushed aside. One box of ammunition had been opened, a few rounds missing. Then I noticed something small that made my chest tighten. A pack of cigarettes, half empty, not mine. I haven't smoked since I was 20, never allowed it in the cabin. Yet here they were, an unfamiliar brand, soft pack, creased at the edges, sitting on the windowsill like someone had just stepped outside for a smoke. The silence pressed in closer. I turned toward the cot. That's when I saw it. A journal, or a notebook. Something small and leather-bound, half hidden beneath my rolled-up sleeping bag. I don't own a leather journal. Never have. I picked it up, hesitant, and flipped it open. The handwriting inside was messy, uneven, the kind you get when someone's writing fast or scared. Most of the pages were blank, but a few had short entries. Day 3, still no one. Food's low. I hear something outside at night. Day 5, don't know how they found this place. Thought I was safe. Day 6, moved the cot, made a barricade. Can't sleep. They keep walking around the cabin. Won't come in. My stomach twisted. The last entry read, "If someone finds this, I didn't mean to break in. I just needed somewhere to hide. Please, don't let them back in." I dropped the journal. My hands were shaking now. I looked toward the body again, and something inside me recoiled. It didn't feel like I was alone in that room. Not truly. The air was too thick, like something was holding its breath, like someone else was watching from just outside my line of sight. I stepped outside again. Fast. The cold slapped me harder this time. The sun had disappeared entirely, and the tree line had vanished into blue-black shadow. I grabbed my flashlight from the truck and flicked it on. The beam cut a narrow cone through the trees. Mist had rolled in from the north slope, threading between the trunks like smoke. I scanned the clearing. That's when I noticed the boot prints. Not mine. They circled around the cabin. Not deep, just enough to mark the frost. But they were fresh, smaller than my own. Probably the same person now lying dead inside, but the spacing was strange, like they'd walked in loops, again and again, close to the cabin walls, like they were pacing or waiting. My light caught something on the porch railing. A mark. 3 short scratches angled down. Not made by an animal. Too clean. Too deliberate. I stared at them, heart hammering. The wind stirred then, just slightly, enough to make the trees groan. A crow called in the distance, sharp and sudden. I spun, flashlight searching the dark. Nothing. I exhaled, slow and ragged. I should have left then, driven straight back to town, but something held me in place. A stubbornness, or maybe just the bone-deep disbelief that any of this could be real. I went back inside, just for a moment. This time, I picked up the note in the figure's hand. It was folded tight, like it had been gripped for dear life. The paper crackled in my fingers as I opened it. 4 words, scrawled in pencil. It wasn't the cold. That's all it said. I dropped the note, backed away again. I couldn't feel my hands anymore, but I didn't care. Every instinct in me screamed that I shouldn't be there. And still, some small part of me kept asking, if it wasn't the cold, then what was it? I stood in the doorway one last time, staring into the cabin. That body hadn't been there long, a week, maybe less. Someone had been living here, eating here, writing, watching, and now they were gone. But whatever they were hiding from, that might still be out there. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat in the truck with the engine off, wrapped in a wool blanket, flashlight clutched in my lap, and the journal beside me on the passenger seat. The body was still inside, just there. That note. It wasn't the cold, kept ringing in my ears like an echo that didn't fade. I should have driven away. I know that. I kept thinking it over and over, but I didn't. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was something deeper, some hunter's instinct that said, you don't walk away until you understand what's stalking you. Because that's how it felt now. Like I was being hunted. Not in the way animals hunt, but something quieter, something patient. At first light, I stepped out into the morning air, damp and heavy. The forest, half swallowed in fog, that clung low to the moss and grass like breath that wouldn't let go. It was colder than it should have been. Not frost, cold unnatural cold. Cold like something had drawn the heat out of the earth itself. I followed the boot tracks behind the cabin. They led downhill toward the creek bed. Each step I took squelched softly in the wet earth. Branches dripped above me, the mist hanging between the trees like curtains I had to walk through. I moved slow, careful, listening. The trail wound past the old bait station I'd set up years ago, now collapsed and half swallowed by vines. That's when I saw more tracks, larger, broader, not the same ones from last night. These were older, but not old enough to ignore. 2 sets, one going toward the cabin, one heading away. I crouched low, touching one print. The edges are dried just slightly, maybe a day or 2 old. The heel was deep. Whoever made it was moving fast. It didn't make sense. Why would someone approach the cabin, then leave in a different direction through denser woods, off trail, unless they weren't planning to come back? I stood slowly, back aching from the cold. I kept walking, deeper into the trees. The fog thickened in pockets, and for a moment, I lost the trail. That's when the memory hit me. A flicker, like déjà vu. Last time I was here almost a year ago, I'd thought I heard something behind the cabin one night. A crunch in the leaves, maybe even breathing. I'd stepped out onto the porch with my flashlight and swept the woods. Nothing. Just darkness and trees. But I remember, and this came back to me sharp, now I'd found something strange the next morning. A single strip of denim, torn and hanging from a broken branch about waist high. I'd assumed it was mine, maybe from a past trip. I'd tossed it and forgotten all about it. Now, I wasn't so sure. I pushed farther until I reached a clearing I didn't recognise. An old fire ring sat in the centre, half buried in moss. Someone had tried to build a shelter nearby. Fallen logs, a tarp torn by weather, and something else. A shoe. Just one, mud-caked and split at the toe. Size 9, maybe 10. My breath caught. I swept my flashlight toward the tree line, and that's when I saw it. Not movement, not a figure. Just the impression of a figure. Like the fog had folded in a way that almost resembled a man standing still, watching. But when I blinked, it was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned slowly, walked back the way I came. No running, just steady steps. If something was out there, I wasn't going to lead it back to the cabin by sounding like prey. Back at the cabin, the air felt heavier. The body hadn't moved. Of course it hadn't. But something else had. The chair. One of the folding chairs I'd tucked neatly against the wall was now pulled out slightly angled toward the cot, toward the body, like someone had been sitting there, watching it, or talking to it. I stared at that chair for a long time. Then I picked up the journal again. There was one more page near the back I hadn't seen before, tucked almost into the binding. Just a few words, scribbled like the writer had run out of time. It knows when I sleep. It waits until I dream. My blood ran cold. I backed out of the cabin and closed the door behind me, locked it. Not for the body's sake, but mine. The sun was higher now, but the light felt pale, washed out. Birds still hadn't returned. No wind, no sounds. I walked the perimeter again, slower this time. Noticed little things I hadn't seen before. A spent matchbook near the back window. A fork sticking out of the dirt like it had been dropped mid-meal. A nail hammered into a tree behind the cabin with no string, no purpose, just there, like a marker. I checked the shed last. The lock was intact. I opened it slowly. Wake. Inside, the tools were mostly where I'd left them. Axes, rope, spare propane, but one thing was out of place. My trail camera. I'd set it up a year ago facing the clearing. Now it was sitting on the workbench, turned off, batteries pulled, and the SD card was missing. That hit me harder than it should have. Someone had gone out of their way to erase whatever it might have seen. Not an animal, not some random drifter. Someone who knew what they were doing. I closed the shed, stepped back, and stared at the tree line. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not mine, not near, just distant enough to question. Soft, deliberate, somewhere behind the far trees. I held my breath, waited. They stopped. I swept my flashlight that way. Nothing. Just trunks and mist and emptiness. But I knew what I'd heard. And now, I wasn't wondering if I was being watched. I knew I was. I didn't go back inside again. Not that day. Not the next morning either. I spent the night in the truck again. Eyes half open. Ears straining for every snap of twig and every shift of wind. The forest was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't restful. It waits. It listens. It presses down. I left the cabin door locked, but I couldn't stop thinking about what was on the other side. The body. The chair that had moved. The journal. That note. It wasn't the cold. And the footsteps I heard in the trees. Around 10 a.m, after hours of sitting motionless in the cab, I made a decision. Not a brave one, not some grand plan, just the kind of decision you make when you know you're running out of explanations. I drove into town. The closest town was over an hour away, mostly downhill through winding dirt roads and old logging paths barely maintained anymore. The whole time I drove, my eyes flicked between the trees. My hands never stopped gripping the wheel. When I got there, I didn't go straight to the sheriff. I stopped at the gas station first, picked up a coffee, watched the other locals, hunters, loggers, old folks in flannel, kids in camo hoodies, laughing on the sidewalk. The world still turned. Nobody else seemed to feel the cold I'd felt, or the weight of whatever I'd walked into. I finally found a payphone near the general store, called the non-emergency number. Didn't give my name at first. Just told the woman on the other end there was a body in a cabin near Crooked Pine Ridge, maybe a mile and a half off the old logging road. Gave rough directions. That was it. She asked if I was the property owner. I hesitated, then hung up. I sat in my truck another 15 minutes before driving back out toward the trail. Something in me needed to see it again. Needed to make sure it hadn't just disappeared. That I wasn't losing my grip. When I got back up to the ridge, the fog had returned, thick and low, branches dripped like rain. I pulled up to the same clearing, same tyre tracks, same broken porch step. And then I saw it. The door was open, just slightly ajar. I froze. I hadn't left it that way. I know I hadn't. I approached slowly, one hand on the handle of the old hunting knife I kept on my belt. My flashlight flicked on, beam cutting through the haze. The inside of the cabin was cold, still, empty. Too empty. The body was gone. The chair had been pushed back. The journal missing. The blanket on the cot was folded now, neatly. The stove was cold. The pack of cigarettes was gone, the matchbook gone. All that was left were footprints, smudged ones, going in and out of the cabin. Not mine. I backed out slowly, flashlight trembling a little in my hand. My breath fogged in front of me. The forest around me felt neutral now, not hostile, not welcoming, just done, like whatever had happened here had run its course. I didn't call again. I didn't wait for deputies to show up. I left, not fast, not panicked, just steady, like I'd finally accepted something I couldn't name, something that didn't need explaining. And I never went back. People asked me later, friends, mostly, the ones who knew I had a place up north, why I stopped going. Why I sold the land, why I burned the maps, deleted the GPS coordinates from my phone, even threw away the old cabin keys. I told them I just got tired of the cold. Let them believe that. What was I going to say? That I found a body in a place only I was supposed to have the key to. That it vanished without a trace after leaving warnings in a journal written by a man no one can name. That I still wake up some nights, convinced I hear pacing on my porch. That sometimes, not often, but sometimes I dream of fog, and matches, and a chair slowly turning toward me in the dark. No, I don't say any of that. I just say I miss the trees, but I know better. I didn't leave the woods. The woods left me, because whatever that was, whatever waited there through the frost and the silence and the long black nights, it chose not to follow me. And for that, I'm grateful, but I'll never forget. Because once you found something in a place only you were supposed to know something wrong, something watching a part of you never fully comes back. It stays out there, in the fog, and every now and then, it remembers your name.